working in this diligently for the last 3 years has put me in a position where I have choices. More than replacing the income, it's more about having the choices, right? It has to be a conscious decision. I'm going to walk away from it and I'm going to build a life around this.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast. My name's Randy Smith, and I'll be your host today. And I am really excited to have I'm sure will be a good friend in the future because we share a lot of mutual connections. But Karan Narang, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Randy.
Very good. So by means of introduction, though, Karan is recently leaving his W-2. He is a property manager, an investor, a coach, a mentor, and basically all things related to short-term rentals. So excited to hear about your journey. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe get us up to speed with what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So to give you a little background, I came to the U.S. about 20 years ago as an immigrant, right? Started with nothing. And I spent about 20 years now up until currently, until I retired last week, spent about 20 years doing consulting in the pharmaceutical supply chain space. I discovered short-term rentals and the potential to invest in short-term rentals about 4 years ago, and I started investing in them. As of today, we've grown our portfolio to 9 properties, including 3 new builds that will go into service in the first quarter of next year. And we're managing about 12 properties for others, in addition to having coached about 40 people in trying to build their own short-term rental businesses. So we've gotten to a point where there is momentum. There is it's become significant enough that I decided to quit my W-2 job and get into this full-time.
Are you interested in real estate investing but don't know where to get started or think you don't have the time or money? Are you stuck in your W-2 because the golden handcuffs make it hard to walk away? If this sounds like you, check out impactequity.net and schedule some time to talk with the founder, Randy Smith. Randy went from massive income to leaving his W-2 through passive income, and he can help you do the same. www.impactequity.net.
Fantastic. And congratulations for leaving the W-2. As a consultant, I suspect that was not a small income to replace. So clearly the portfolio is doing well for you.
Yes, I cannot complain about it. It has been a game changer for me. And what I found is working in this diligently for the last 3 years has put me in a position where I have choices. More than replacing the income, it's more about having the choices, right? It has to be a conscious decision. I'm going to walk away from it and I'm going to build a life around this. So I'm grateful that I've been afforded the opportunity to be able to do this.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, I mean, it's the goal that so many people really search for when they're getting into real estate or really just anything throughout your career would be to get to a point where you can leave and know that you've got a sustainable income that's going to support you and your family to meet all your needs. So I'm curious why you chose the short-term rental space. What was it about short-term rentals that really caught your interest or piqued your interest early on?
Yeah, so when I started investing in short-term rentals, I realized very quickly that I could go the local route or I could go the expressway in building my wealth, right? There is higher risk in short-term rentals, but what I realized is that if invested correctly, you had the potential to make more than the $200, $300, $400 a door that you make with multifamily. You buy a 20-unit building and you're making $400 a door. That's $8,000 a month, right? I mean, that's different. Now you still got to buy a 20-unit building. That's a significant investment. And what's the easiest? I won't call it easiest, but let's say what's the path with the least resistance towards building the wealth? And my whole philosophy was, I am not a very high income earner, though it was decent. I'm not a doctor that makes $1 million a year. I've been blessed with a above average income. And if I had to invest all my money and my savings in an asset class, I wanted to do it in something that would help me kick it off at a higher pace, even if I choose to diversify in the future. I needed to see the bigger cash flow coming in early on so that I can rotate it into newer properties and build that portfolio to a sizable return to be able to make enough money to start diversifying. So that was a strategy I went with. The other reason why I started with short-term rentals is having a full-time W-2 job. I knew there was no way I could get a tax write-off to shelter my W-2 income with it, because you can't, with multifamily or other classes, you can't really pursue the real estate professional status, which is what everyone goes after as an investor in real estate, and that's not available, or is potentially not available for people with a full-time W-2 job, because you got to justify being in real estate for most part of the year.
Perfect. So yeah, let's dig into that if we can a little bit. I've had a couple of cost segregation experts on here that have talked about that loophole where if you own and manage one single short-term rental, then there's a lot of tax benefits. That I do have to preface this, of course, neither Karan or myself are tax professionals or CPAs or are giving any type of tax advice, but what's your experience with that? Can you tell the audience more?
I did exactly that. So I find people asking me all the time, hey, how did you get there? What did you do? I want to do what you did. And I said, it's pretty straightforward. I got my first short-term rental. I took the cash flow from it, which is way higher than cash flow on regular properties. I took the cash flow from it. I added to it the depreciation that I got from the cost segregation done on the property. So it saved me in taxes. I added that to the investment, and I took the same amount of money again to roll it in and basically buy the next property. Every time you roll that money in, the cash flow plus the tax savings from depreciation plus additional investment, now your portfolio is growing at a pace. And once you get to about 5 properties, it starts to snowball and starts to, you start buying. You can essentially buy a property every year from those tax savings and from that cash flow, right? So it help build that snowball and grow big. So my experience with that whole thing has been phenomenal. There's unfortunately that depreciation has now gone down. 2023, you can only write off about 80% of what you could last year, and 2024 it's going to be 60%. But hey, 60% is still a significant number. Still makes the equation a lot better than investing in most other assets or equities or something different. So it's a blessing.
Absolutely. It is an absolute game changer for folks that are able to, one, have the bandwidth, because my understanding is you do have to manage it yourself as well. But two, have the know-how or know somebody that can teach them how to do this process to get that process started. So let's dig into some actual numbers, or maybe some general numbers that maybe we can get an idea, just to kind of share how powerful that can be. Say you've got a high income sales guy that's making $300,000-$400,000 a year, and he's paying, what, 20, high 20, low 30% tax bracket.
Yeah.
If we're buying, well, let's do this. What's the average size or average cost home that is in your portfolio today?
Probably a little higher than most. My average is about $1 million, give or take.
Okay.
But most clients that I coach with, I always tell them there's a big part of short-term rentals, right? There is a time investment required. Unless you're going completely passive, which is great. If you can pull it off, it's great. But if you're not doing it completely passive, there is a time investment. If I'm going to invest an hour of my time, take the example of the guy who's making $400,000 a year. His hourly rate is $200 an hour because there's 2,000 hours in a year. If I'm going to invest an hour operating my short-term rental, I should be pretty certain of making way over $200 an hour, right? If I have a property and I have a booking is a booking, whether it is 2-bedroom property or a 6-bedroom property. A guest inquiry is a guest inquiry, whether it's 2-bedroom property or a 6-bedroom property. So my advice to most people is, if you're starting off with your first property, ideally you want to buy something bigger. Ideally you want something, that's 3 or 4 bedroom, that starts typically at 800. So of the 35 some clients that have bought properties after my coaching in the last few years, they're typically averaging at about $800,000. Now let's go by that example, right? If you take a property that's $800,000, again, I'm not a tax pro or a cost segregation expert, so do your own due diligence. But typically, about 25% of it is what you could have as a cost segregation benefit. For people who don't know, I'll give a very quick primer on that. Based on tax rules that were passed by Trump a few years ago, all property that is categorized as 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and 15 year can be depreciated in year one of placing it in service. So if you place it in service in 2023, you can basically write off that amount in 2023. Because most CPAs will tell you that it's a straight line depreciation for a residential property that's 27 years, right? But when you start looking at cost segregation, you're basically taking a building and saying the windows are written off in 10 years, the carpet's written off in 5 years, and the roof is written off in 15 years. So the depreciation schedule varies, it changes. So about 25% of the makeup of the purchase price is basically the 1, 5, 10, and 15-year property that you will write off year one. So let's go by the example of $800,000. $200,000 is your write-off in year one. It's actually not the write-off it was a couple of years ago. Now the IRS came back and said it is 60% of 200 in 2024, right? So 60% of 200 is $120,000 write-off on your tax return. So the guy who's making $400,000 a year is going to go write off the top 120,000 of that income. So it's because we're in a marginal tax system, the highest tax dollars are the ones you actually write off. So your AGI, or adjusted gross income, is what goes down from 400 to 280. So you just save 30% in taxes on the $120,000 you wrote off. That's a big number.
That's a big number. To put it into concrete terms, if you saved $120,000 off of that at 30%, you're talking $36,000, $40,000 in taxes that you've saved. Yeah. And I think the strategy you shared is that if you did this for 5 years in a row, by the time you've done that, you've created quite a nice portfolio that will snowball into buying new assets in the future. So. Now, I'm curious if you know this. This is something I've not gotten an answer on yet, but with the step down process that's going on with the bonus depreciation, accelerated depreciation, do you end up still, let's say it's in the 80-20 as we are in 23.
Yeah.
You only get 80% of that total. My understanding is that you get the remainder, the other 20% in subsequent years, though. Are you familiar with how that works?
Absolutely. So take, for example, and we'll make this real simple to calculate this, right? So 27 and a half years is usually your write-off, okay? So let's go 27 and let's say the property is 270,000, okay? The depreciation is still the same. So the IRS says that the property value in 27 years is going to become zero. It's not zero because the land still has value on it, but we'll ignore that for now, right? You never depreciate land. But the property itself, the construction, the structure, the value of that is going to be depreciated to zero in your books, okay? When you do the cost segregation study, 1, 5, 10, and 15-year property, you're accelerating that depreciation. You're taking all that depreciation in year one, and the rest still continues every year. So your depreciation in other years goes down a little bit. So it's not like you lost that depreciation. It's still going to continue. You're still going to get it, except you're not getting it in year one. It's going to get spread out over the remaining years. So it's not gone. It's still there.
Yep. And I would even argue, even after bonus depreciation, accelerated depreciation is gone, cost segregations still are beneficial just simply because of that 1, 5, 7, and 10-year depreciation that you can get as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. It slows down,
very
but
good.
it's still worth a lot.
Well, very good. So that in and of itself, in my opinion, I think is a reason to get involved in the short-term rental space. And it's something that I suggest to high-income W-2 earners in conjunction with becoming a passive investor as well, because those two strategies combined together can be extremely powerful when you start looking at the depreciation benefits you can get from a multifamily or a fund or anything else like that. To marry with those can be really powerful.
No, it can be really powerful. The problem is even now, like you can invest in multifamily, just a different asset class. But the problem is most of the multifamily operators are kind of in trouble right now. They're not able to make those returns. They're not able to, interest rates are going up. So as of today, they're coming down, but still, it still makes a difference. The cash flow is way higher. Now, the best part about it is if you get really savvy with it, right? Which is what I would encourage people to look into. If you get really savvy with it, and you go on the passive side and start investing with your solo 401k or with your Roth IRAs, what's going to happen is that increased cash flow you get from short-term rentals gets rolled right into it. And you're now saving tremendous amount of taxes and keep snowballing into bigger and bigger. Your wealth's going to grow at a different pace altogether. So you're going to make a choice. Am I going to be active? Am I going to do this myself? Or am I going to be passive and let it kind of snowball and get creative and still benefit? Either way you look at it, it's a game changer for people. It's been a game changer for me. Hey, you know what? Look, 3.5 years later, I'm quitting my job, or I quit my job, right?
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's such an amazing strategy. And I'm thinking about the newer investor that is maybe where you were 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
What does that path look like? If you're buying an $800,000 house, are folks having to put a couple $100,000 down to buy these assets? Or are there other programs that can decrease that out-of-pocket cost?
So there are some programs. There's a vacation home. You can buy it as a vacation home, and if you plan to use it for a little bit for your personal use, there's some rules that you got to dance around. But most people getting into a property the first time, the first short-term rental, can go do a 10% down vacation home loan on the property and do it. Now your cash on cash return is really, really high, and it's your first one, so it's a good way to enter it. So if you're going to buy $1 million property, you can put in $100,000. I would also make sure people budget. So I always, when I coach people, my focus is very clear. I tell them, not only do you care about the down payment, there's money to be put in for furnishing. There's money to be put in to make the property look real nice, because that's the game changer in short-term rentals. You want it to rent well. You want to put in the amenities. You want to be competitive. What I also tell them is, don't forget to put in reserves, because any sort of investment is risky. Any real estate is risky. There is risk involved with it. Make sure you save yourself enough reserves and let's go in, right? Let's make this happen. So yeah, I mean, people can do 10% down. There's several lenders out there that I've referred people to in the past that'll do 10% down vacation home loans. Still out there.
I love it. Yeah, and I think there isn't there like a mileage requirement. It has to be within X amount of miles from your home or drive time, or there seems to be some caveat, I believe.
No, there's lenders. Again, depending on who you shop around with, and if there's most of my properties, by the way, I typically do 20% down, just because I like that cushion of having a little more equity in it. They're all beyond 3 or 4 hours. That's the other thing that people think about as short-term rentals. They're like, hey, I bought this property because it's close to my home. I'm like, no, that's the wrong approach, guys, because if you have the systems, you work on the systems, the processes, and the people. Build your team locally, build your team, the people you're going to use, have the right lenders, have the right property, use the right realtor who can coach you and guide you the right way. Now, all of a sudden, doesn't matter where the property is. I'm buying a property where it makes most money versus buying a property that's kind of close to home. In fact, I hate the properties that are close to home.
Sure.
Oh, your mindset, the way your brain works, it's close to home. I'm going to drive over this weekend and fix this light bulb. No, you know what?
Right.
We want to be passive. We want to keep this kind of hands off. If it's close to you, you will find every reason to go fix things. And guess what that does? It takes away from your family time, takes away from your other things that you do, it takes away from just spending quality time at home. And that's not the point. You want to invest in any assets, including real estate or short-term rentals, because you want to improve the quality of your life, not to destroy it, right? So that's how I coach most of my clients. And I'm like, listen, let's not mess this up. Let's do this the right way. So again, my piece of advice for most people getting in the first time, take the time to do it the right way. Put in those processes and the systems, get the right people in the right seats, make sure you have your team ready, and then go in and do it. Or go passive, that's fine too. Either way you're going to make money, go passive or do it the right way. But don't try to wing it. Because when you wing it, that's when you come back to me 6 months from now and say, hey, I need to be rescued. And that's not
Sure.
for anyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great advice. I love systems, process, and people are really the core. So I'm curious, when you're buying a new asset and you're looking at budgeting, you put the 20% down. Is there like a rough figure you use based on square footage or number of rooms that you spend on design and furnishing and, kitchen utilities and appliances and that type of stuff? Or is there something you can share there?
It all depends on the level. Most of our properties are, what we would consider upper mid-tier or luxury properties. So they're on the higher end of things. Typically, depending on the state, especially if you're buying a short-term rental, some of them already come furnished, so it's hard to tell. But the guidance I would give in from a budgeting perspective, I would budget at least 10,000 or so per room. And that includes, for example, four bedrooms, that's 40,000. The fifth bedroom, let's say it's your living room, and then you've got a kitchen, you've got a dining, so all around 60 to 70,000. You want to put it aside. And the reason I say that is because in this market where short-term rentals have gotten so competitive, you got to be at the top of your game. When any of my clients or any properties we're managing, when we take over, the first thing we do is we say, go look at everything. Because I'll tell you what's going to destroy your business. You will go in and you'll start managing, or you're going to operate this property. The first time a guest finds a stained towel, they'll leave this nasty review, and now you've got to fight for it, right? And if you're
Sure.
the linens and the towels that someone else left behind, or the pillows that someone left behind, you're running
Yeah.
the risk of being discovered, and it's not worth it. It's not fun. I go in, and that literally costs us 5,000. We go in and we basically say, take out all the linens, all the pillows, all the blankets, all that stuff, all the cookware. Because you know what? We're operating properties. Some of our properties do 2,400 a night. When I'm operating a property that's 2,400 a night, guess what? The guest expects the cookware to look pristine like new. So we
course.
basically go in and we throw everything out and we get new stuff. Hey, a new set of cookware from Costco is what, $200. You know what? Just go put it. So I tell people from the get-go, expect that you will basically turn this property completely over. You're going to take out all the linens. You may have to replace mattresses. You may have to replace cookware, bakeware, all that stuff. We're going to dump everything, because we don't want that one crusty pan that someone left behind last Thanksgiving, and now it looks like, this is disgusting. We're not doing that. So it's all about starting off the right way. When someone complains about something, at least you know what you put in there. Otherwise, you don't even know, hey, did this property, I don't even know, hey, the guest says the cup was broken and it cut my lips or whatever, or, it
Right.
broke when I was drinking it, or I poured coffee and I burned myself. You have no clue whether they were new, broken, chipped, or what. So do it the right way, start the right way, and don't mess up there.
I love it. So yeah, it seems like we're getting into the property management discussion at this point, and that seems to be clearly something that is a strength for you in the organization, because people are now coming to you in droves almost,
Yeah.
asking you to manage that. So talk about the property management process if you can. You mentioned systems and people. So how is it an automated process? Do you leverage customer service centers? Like, how does that all work?
So our process, total, if you looked at the owned and managed properties, we're somewhere in the 20 properties right now and growing very steadily. By the end of 2024, we should be at about 50 properties that we're managing, and it's growing. And the idea is that you're putting those systems and processes in place early. We use a very hybrid approach, right? We have a lot of systems. We've got our back-end systems, our property management system at the back end, but we also have people. So we've got our BAs who are in the Philippines, and we offer, again, this is how we stand out. People ask us all the time, hey, looks like you're outperforming the market. How are you doing that, right? The way we do that is because of the service we offer. When you come stay at one of our properties, our branding it's called Adventure Awaits, right? And when you come and stay at one of our properties, you are basically getting access to 24/7 concierge services. There's a phone number you can call, and someone's available to answer your questions, to respond to your queries, because we're building a hospitality business. We're building a portfolio of properties where people are going to come and have a good time. It's a business where there's so many different moving parts, and you have to stay on top of it. And there will be mistakes. If you're getting in this business, things will be bad. The dishwasher's got to get bad sometime. Okay, you can't time it where it's going to get bad when there's no guest there. So when it gets bad and the guest is there, 9 out of 10 times, if you provide the service, if the guest sends a message, most of them send a text message, we're in communication with our guests, they'll say, hey, the dishwasher isn't working. As long as you take reasonable effort to try and fix it or replace it or whatever you do, you respond to them in timely fashion and you make a reasonable effort to take care of their needs, they will leave you a positive review and appreciate it. This is hospitality. Even if you only have one property, it's hospitality. So that's how our operations work. We've got VAs in the Philippines who help us basically manage the guest experience, who help us manage the property, who help coordinate with all the cleaners, the maintenance, and all that stuff, the day-to-day operations. They're handling it. Our system does a lot of the work. It basically sends out a lot of automated messages. When you book it, you get a message. When you check in, you get a message. For your check-in messages is all automated. So we automate, I'll say 80% of stuff is kind of automated. And the time when our concierge guys, our concierge managers actually jump in is when there's a concern. Obviously, as the portfolio grows, there's more people saying, hey, this isn't working, that's not working. Hey, how do I unlock the door because I can't find the code? That happens all the time. In one of them,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So, they're responding to it. They're taking care of the guest needs. And then a lot of it is automated. About 80% of it is automated. 20% is manually done by our team in the Philippines.
Love it. So what, all of this, that's a very different experience than what I've had when I've stayed in short-term rentals. I certainly didn't have somebody answering a phone call when I was reaching out to them. I was stuck in the app and waiting hours for responses, those types of things. So there's got to be a cost for that. So as an investor that's bringing a property to you, what kind of fees could they expect to be paying to have your services for property management?
Yeah, so we charge what we think is in tune with the market, which is 15%. And then we have a monthly technology fee that goes along with it to cover all these different systems and processes. But 15% of gross revenue is what we normally charge. Now, we've got some properties that are larger, big property that has, 9 different units that, can have weddings and it's probably going to do about $500,000 a year, give or take, in revenue. We'll lower that percent for them a little bit as a courtesy. It's a big property. So it could vary a little bit, but generally in that 15% mark.
Interesting. Yeah. And I remember when I looked at this space a number of years ago, I saw a number of property management groups that were in the high 20 to 30% range for property management. So that's very, very reasonable.
It has changed a lot. Back in the day, they used to call it property managers. Now, even though we manage properties, we're actually co-hosts, right? It's a joint effort. And basically, we coordinate all the operations, but we're helping you build your business, right? It's not our business. Most traditional property managers charge 25 or 30%, and they would own the listing, they would own the bookings, they would do all of this. They would collect the money for cleanings, they would collect the money for pet fees, and they'd make money on each of those items. We don't. We allow the owners to make the money. We charge them a service fee at the end of the month. We send an invoice for the 15%, and that's it. The cleaner gets paid what the guest is willing to pay the cleaner. The reason you find sometimes people complaining about, hey, the cleaning fees are too high. That's because property managers many times will mark it up by $20, $15 every clean, and it adds up for them different source of revenue. So if actually I can do the math, historically the traditional property managers probably in the 30 to 40% range pretty easily. And most times when owners work with property managers, what they would be getting is essentially a break even with their mortgage, and all of them think this is a vacation rental, which means I get to enjoy the property, and then it's breaking even, it's paying for itself, and they don't know what they're missing, right? So that's where the savvy investors come into play, and they understand what's the opportunity cost of doing it that way. And for us, again, it started off as us building our own portfolio and our own processes and systems, and then a few friends coming on and saying, hey, can you help us manage this? And we said, let's go, let's do it. And we basically bring in, if you come to us and say, manage my property, your property is being managed just like mine is, because my team doesn't differentiate whether it's my property or yours. It's all treated the same. If you go to our Facebook page, which is Adventure the Way It Stays, you'll see marketing on there for every single property, even the ones we don't own, right? So we're we're driving a lot of direct booking traffic through our marketing. We have email marketing that goes out, and every property that we manage kind of becomes part of the system, because that's what is the differentiator. Anybody can manage the property when things are going well. Anybody can manage the property in peak season. It's going to get booked, right? It's in the shoulder seasons when things aren't going as well for most people is when you need to outperform. That's when you separate yourself from all the other crowd.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's it's an amazing story, and you've done just amazing things in a relatively short amount of time, and it sounds like you're helping a lot of people do that. So I'm curious, for the listener that is interested in connecting with you or your team to hear about the additional service that you can offer, how could the audience find you guys?
So the easiest way to find us is, again, on it's AA Stays. That's our website. Adventure awaits. AA Stays, STAYS.com. Or again, send me a text message. That's the easiest way, quickest way. My number is 682-651-1700, and they can reach out, or submit an inquiry through our website. That works too. You'll only see the properties on there yet. Like I mentioned to you earlier, we're in the process. I just quit the W-2 and are in the process of launching officially and coming out with more. And yeah, set some time up and we can chat. If there's anywhere we can add value to your audience, we'd be able to help. We'd love to help. And yeah, whatever we can do to help.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, very good. Well, this has been a lot of fun hearing about that journey. As I mentioned to you earlier, I started to look into the short-term rental with personally managing my own assets early on, and very, very quickly found out that this is much more complicated than something I wanted to do personally. Yeah. So I went strictly down the passive route through investing in funds, but it sounds like a really, really great option for the high-income W-2 earner that is looking for tax advantages and just looking for a great experience for not only for the business, but for also some personal benefit as well. So really, really interesting story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, and again, like I said, if done properly, doesn't need to be a second job. It can be done, right? So yeah, good luck to your listeners, and I really hope they can benefit from this. If they have any other questions, want to ping me or whatever, I'll be happy to help. And just reach out.
Fantastic. Well, before we wrap up here, I do have a few questions that I like to ask everybody. So if we've got a few minutes, I'll jump right into that. So folks that are interested in learning more about short-term rentals, are there any particular educational resources or books or podcasts that you would steer folks to get started?
Yes, there's several podcasts available online. And there's several Facebook groups that you can go in, right? But the only thing to be cautious about is there's a lot of marketing, right? You just got to make sure you know how to filter through it and find out what's real and what's not. There's a lot of marketing, so be cautious. The Short-Term Shop is a decent resource. They have a good podcast. So I would certainly look up their Facebook page. There's another Facebook page online called Build Short-Term Rental Wealth. Quite nice, by Bill Faith. A lot of resources, big community online for all this stuff. And yeah, from a ability perspective or from a learning perspective, seek out some coaches. It's easiest because you're talking about an investment that is, upwards of $500,000 at least. Under that, there's usually not properties that kind of make sense for high income earners.
Sure.
When you're going to invest, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, go spend the money it takes to find a coach who can help you out through it. That's the easiest way. And just, I look at coaches and I say, you know what, they're the ones who can help you cut down the decades and make it into days, right? So I think that makes a difference.
Yep. Success leaves clues for sure. So yeah, very good. All right. Well, kind of a fun question here that I've been asking all of my, all of the folks that come on the show, but one that's unique probably to your and my background in that we're both in GoBundance. This is the bucket list item question. So is there a recent bucket list item you've checked off your list or one you're hoping to in the near future?
So we are a very adventurous family. My kids are 9, 9, and 11 and probably have more stamps on the passport than most grown-ups that we know and normally. We're actually headed next week to Machu Picchu in Peru and to Patagonia. And, that's the most, the one that's closest that's coming up. Apart from that, we've done a lot. The one I'm absolutely looking forward to in a few years is basically a cruise to Antarctica with the kids.
Fantastic. So you're a thrill seeker and a passport stamper. I love it.
We do a
Very
lot.
cool.
Every year we're doing 2 or 3 trips, and people often ask me. That's why people come up to me and say, "You're doing all these short-term rentals, man. How come you're gone for 4 and 6 weeks?" This summer we went to India, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia. We're gone for like 6 weeks, and I'm like, if you have the right systems and the processes, and you got that in place, you put the foundation in place, it doesn't have to become another job.
I love it. All right. And one final question here. If you had $100,000 that you were going to place into investment today and you could not invest in one of your own deals, where would you place that capital?
And it could not be my own.
Right.
Again, it's kind of a layup. I'd find someone else who invested in short-term rentals for me.
There you go. I had a feeling you might say that, but yeah, definitely.
That's what I do, man. That's what I'm all about.
I love it. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. I think you brought a ton of value to the audience and a very different perspective than what we've heard before. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
All right. And to the audience, as always, we want to thank you again for joining us today. Our advice is always to continue the education process, but more importantly than that, make a decision to invest in your first passive income or in maybe a short-term rental and work with folks like Karan. And we're convinced once you make that first decision and that first investment, you'll just wish that you had started sooner. So be sure to join us again next Thursday for another great episode. And thank you again for being with us today.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.